You know, after you've been in this business for a while, I've been in it for about 15 years now. Initially, you're very excited about things, the things you can do, the things you show people how to do. But after a while, it kind of wears off a little bit, and you don't get jazzed about things quite as quickly or as enthusiastically as you used to. Well, that changed for me here the last couple days as I started looking into Elements 11, Adobe Photoshop Elements 11 to be specific. Photoshop, as it got more advanced, more tools were added, things like that, but it became more intuitive. It's a very cool program, and to me, it's easier to use now and easier to get to achieve the things that I want to do in the program in a shorter amount of time. It's really helped my workflow. Elements has been backwards in that process, I think. It started out to be very easy to use, and then they started doing all these advancements with the interface, so on and so forth, and as a result, it became very difficult to find things and actually made the workflow kind of bogged it down, right? Well, what we're looking at here is Elements 11. And as you can see, if you've got Elements 10, Elements 9, so on, they've really streamlined things here. I mean, it's very clean, very crisp. You have your toolbar over here on the left-hand side. You have just very minimal amount of selections over here on the right, adjustments. Okay, and you actually have 3 buttons here. When you open up Elements, you go to the organizer or to the editor or whatever. This is, of course, the editor. And you have 3 big buttons. You have Quick, Guided, and Expert. Quick and Guided, I'll cover those in other videos. But what we want to look at here is in Expert. Now, if you're familiar with my website, you know that I started out as an actions guy. I create Photoshop actions, okay? I've done that for years. I developed my whole business model initially around creating actions, all right? Well, actions for Elements, you had to create them in Photoshop and then grab a whole bunch of files, make image files, do all this other stuff, drag and drop them to different folders. It was a very major pain. Elements 10 was a little bit easier, but still very hard to describe somebody the process. So if I was creating actions in Photoshop and I wanted an Elements user to use them, just the process of telling them or describing how to get them to work in Elements was a very tedious task. That's gone away, fortunately, for Elements 11. And let me show you why. When we're in Expert mode, if you go to Window, there's an Actions palette. You select Actions right at the top of the list from that menu. And we actually have an Actions, what we used to call a palette, now is a panel, I guess. And you can actually load actions via this panel. And they're very quick, easy to find, so on and so forth. No more of those big old bulky icons. It's just a simple Photoshop structure. This actually, to me, reminds me a lot of Photoshop 6, Photoshop 7. So if I open up this panel, I can actually load actions straight into the program from anywhere on my hard drive. So I open up this little menu in the upper right corner. That opens the menu. Come down to Load Actions. You navigate to a folder where you have a bunch of actions, and you can load them. Okay, so I've loaded a couple actions here, just for example. All right, now here's one, Deep Focus 3. Let's go ahead and play that on this image. This is one I created in Photoshop for use in both Photoshop and Elements, and I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and we'll see what happens. There you go. The effect is applied. Now, this action created a new layer. Actually, it created several layers, adjustments, so on and so forth, but it merged them all into this layer right here that says actioneffects.com, my little form of advertising, and a background layer. Now, let's say this action was a little overpowering. The effect was, boy, I'd really like to scoot that back a little bit. What you can do is simply go to the opacity up here in the layers palette and reduce the opacity, okay, and just till you get a desired effect. If we turn it off, right now I've got the opacity set to about 42, so we've made it very subtle, but the change is still there, okay. I think that is very cool. Now, as I was going through this last night, or last couple nights actually, doing some experiments. I was running actions that I created specifically for Photoshop that did not work in earlier versions of Elements, and they were running to completion in Elements 11, and I was very shocked by this. Let me go ahead and demonstrate here very quickly. Here I have an action. I actually created this, I believe, in the year 2000, like something like 3 days after Y2K. So it tells you, this is a 12-year-old action, almost a teenager. Okay. When I select this, let's go ahead and play it. Now this was designed solely to work in Photoshop, and this is one of those I could never get to work in Elements correctly. But when I load it into Elements 11, here's my stop message. It says insert text with type mask tool. I hit stop. Let's go ahead at that point and increase the size of the image. It looks a little small. This is 100%. I believe this action I created for web graphics. So I'll just go to image, down to resize, go to image size, and bump this up a little bit. Now if you have these checked right here, scale styles, constrain proportions, resample image, normally, by default, resample image is not selected. Now look what happens. If I go to 300, it's going to change these numbers too. But it actually reduces it down to inch and a half, a little over inch and a half to 1 inch point 2. All right. So in order to change that size and be able to manually change these as well, I have to check this resample image right here. So I'll do that. I'll just enter a width of 9 and a height of about 5, and we'll click OK. And now it's also at 300 pixels per inch. Okay, if you remember, that last stop message said enter some type with a type mask tool. That's located under your type tools right here in the tool menu, toolbar. And in Photoshop, you used to have this option, or you have this options bar up here. All your settings for that specific tool are located at the top of Photoshop. Right now, or in Elements 11, they're nice big area right here, easy to see, easy to understand on the bottom. So from here, I can select my type or font style that I want. All right, I'll just keep the one I've got right now. It's called Salmon, and regular size, so on and so forth. So now I'll just go ahead, click in here, type in some text. Probably want to reduce the size of my image so you can see what I'm typing here. All right, once that's typed in there, I want to go ahead and click the layer, get rid of that mask, and now we'll just have this type selection with the type bounding box around it. All right, so I'll just go back to my actions palette. I've met the criteria of that stop message. I'll go ahead and click play one more time. See what happens. Now again, this would not work in earlier versions of Elements, but I just on the fly loaded this into Elements 11, and bam, there we go. It worked just fine. So I'm not saying this will happen in every case, but it's exciting to me that it's going to work in a lot of cases. I tried this with various adjustment layers last night, things that would not work in Elements 10, Elements 9, and they were working just fine in here. They were uneditable, especially in a case of like curves and things like that, but the adjustment layer was still present, and the adjustment had been applied to the image. So that's one of the reasons I'm jazzed about Elements 11. I'll come out with more videos on the topic as I keep on experimenting.